The soft glow of neon signs flickered against the dusk as James Carter parked his weathered pickup truck outside Millie's Taproom, a humble bar on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. The bar was a haven for locals, truckers, and weary travelers alike, offering cold drinks and a slice of solace from the demands of life. For James, a soldier recently returned from deployment, it was a place to find quiet amidst the chaos of reintegration. Pushing open the creaky door, James stepped inside and was greeted by a hum of laughter, clinking glasses, and the strains of a Johnny Cash song from the jukebox. The room was filled with familiar characters, a few pool players, a lone figure at the bar nursing a drink, and a group laughing boisterously near the dartboard. James found a corner table and settled in, his camouflage jacket blending into the muted surroundings. He ordered a soda, savoring the momentary reprieve. His thoughts drifted to his family, his mother's cooking, his nephew's bright smile, and the warm embrace of home. The world outside seemed distant, a far cry from the battlefields he'd left behind. But peace would be fleeting. The bar door swung open, and in strode a group of 6 leather-clad men, their presence palpable. Their leader, a burly man with a grizzled beard and a swagger that spoke of authority, scanned the room with hawkish eyes. James noted their patches and insignias, remnants of their veteran status. He returned his focus to his drink, hoping to remain unnoticed. But the leader's gaze landed on James, narrowing with suspicion. He muttered to his group, and they began exchanging pointed glances. The air in the room grew heavier, tension building with every passing second. James's training had taught him to stay calm under pressure, but he could feel the weight of their scrutiny. When the leader barked a mocking remark about James's sneakers paired with his fatigues, the men behind him laughed. Their taunts grew louder, their words tinged with disdain. James's quiet evening was rapidly unraveling into something much darker. The leader, who introduced himself as Hank, swaggered up to James's table. His voice was loud enough to draw the attention of everyone in the bar. "Nice outfit, soldier boy. Looks like you got it at a costume store. Or maybe you're just looking for handouts." James met Hank's stare, his voice calm and steady. "I'm not looking for anything but peace." Hank smirked and leaned closer, his beer-soaked breath invading James's space. "Peace, huh? You don't belong here. Real soldiers don't show up in sneakers. You're a fake." The bar grew silent. James took a measured breath and replied evenly, "I don't need your validation to prove my service." Hank's smirk faltered, replaced by irritation. He lunged toward James, grabbing for his collar. In a swift, practiced motion, James sidestepped, twisted Hank's arm behind his back, and pinned him against the table. The room erupted in gasps as James's calm authority silenced the bullies. "Think twice before you start something you can't finish," James said, his voice low but firm. Hank struggled, snarling threats, but the biker's bravado crumbled under James's grip. The other patrons watched in stunned silence, their respect for James growing with each passing second. James released Hank, who stumbled back, humiliated but unyielding. One of his men pulled out a phone and dialed 911, accusing James of impersonating a soldier and assaulting Hank. Within minutes, the sound of sirens cut through the tension. 2 police officers entered, their presence commanding. The leader of the pair, Officer Ramirez, surveyed the scene with sharp eyes. Hank was quick to point a finger at James, spewing accusations of assault and fraud. James stood tall, his voice unwavering as he explained, "I'm a U.S. Army veteran. These men confronted me without cause. When their leader became physical, I defended myself." The bartender corroborated James's account, stepping forward with quiet courage. Other patrons nodded in agreement, their collective testimony dismantling Hank's claims. When Officer Ramirez asked James for proof of service, James calmly retrieved his duffel bag. Inside was his uniform, adorned with medals and his name tag. Ramirez inspected the items and nodded. "You're clear, Sergeant Carter. Thank you for your service." Turning to Hank, Ramirez's tone hardened. "False accusations are a serious offense. You're lucky Sergeant Carter isn't pressing charges." Hank's bravado deflated, and the bikers shuffled out of the bar, their earlier arrogance replaced by awkward silence. James returned to his table, his composure intact, earning quiet nods of respect from the patrons. As the tension dissipated, the atmosphere slowly returned to normal. The jukebox resumed its tunes, and the clinking of glasses echoed through the room once more. James sat back, taking a deep breath. He hadn't wanted any trouble, but sometimes trouble found you regardless. A man from a nearby table approached him, offering a hand. "Name's Frank. That was impressive, what you did there. Not many people would have handled it like that." James shook Frank's hand, nodding politely. "Thanks. Just did what I had to do." Frank smiled. "You know, not everyone around here likes those guys. They think they own the place. It's good to see someone stand up to them." James appreciated the sentiment, but simply nodded again, not wanting to draw more attention. He had come here to find peace, and while the evening hadn't gone as planned, he was glad it hadn't ended worse. The bartender, a middle-aged woman named Millie, came over and placed another soda in front of James, free of charge. "On the house," she said, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "Thanks for keeping things from getting out of hand." James smiled, tipping his head in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Millie." As he sipped his soda, James's thoughts drifted once again to his family. He was reminded of why he fought, why he endured. It was for them, for moments like these where he could come home, find a corner of quiet, and simply be. No matter the obstacles, no matter the challenges, he would always stand up for what was right, both on the battlefield and in the everyday battles life threw his way. And as the night wore on, James knew that while the fight against ignorance and prejudice was far from over, tonight, he had made a small difference. And that, for now, was enough. A few days later, James was in his driveway, working on his pickup truck. The warm afternoon sun cast long shadows as he tightened a bolt under the hood. The memory of the bar incident lingered, not as a source of anger, but as a reminder of the ignorance he often faced. The sound of a motorcycle approaching pulled James from his thoughts. He straightened and watched as one of Hank's crew, a wiry man named Billy, rolled into the driveway. Billy dismounted cautiously, his posture uneasy. "James, right?" Billy said, voice low. James nodded but remained silent, waiting for Billy to explain his presence. Billy fidgeted, stuffing his hands into his jacket pockets. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened at the bar. Hank was way out of line, and I didn't stop him. I should have." James studied Billy's face, searching for sincerity. "Why now?" Billy's gaze dropped to the ground. "Because it's the right thing to do. Seeing you handle yourself with such dignity, it made me realize how wrong we were. You didn't deserve that." For a long moment, James said nothing. Then he sighed, his expression softening. "Apology accepted. But actions speak louder than words, Billy. If you want to make it right, stand up against prejudice, even when it's uncomfortable." Billy nodded, relief washing over his face. "I will. Thank you, James." As Billy rode away, James felt a sense of hope. The confrontation at the bar had been ugly, but it sparked a ripple of change, however small. The following weekend, James found himself at the local community center. It was a place where veterans and community members gathered for support and camaraderie. He hadn't planned on coming, but something about Billy's apology made him want to reconnect with others who understood his journey. Inside the center, the walls were adorned with photographs of service members, and the sound of chatter filled the air. James spotted a familiar face, Frank, the man who had approached him at Millie's Taproom. Frank waved him over with a warm smile. "Glad to see you here, James. We could use some help setting up for the event," Frank said, gesturing to a stack of chairs. James nodded, rolling up his sleeves. "Sure thing. What's the event?" Frank's face lit up. "It's a community outreach day. We're inviting local kids to meet veterans, learn about service, and build some connections. We want to show them that soldiers aren't just people in uniforms. They're part of this community." As James helped set up, he noticed Billy enter the center. Billy looked around nervously before catching sight of James. He hesitated for a moment, then made his way over. "Hey, James," Billy greeted, his voice steadier than before. I heard about this event from Frank. Thought I'd come by and help out." James studied Billy for a moment, then smiled. "Glad to have you here." The day progressed, and soon, the community center was buzzing with activity. Children ran around, laughing and asking questions, while veterans shared stories of their time in service. James found himself sitting at a table with a group of kids, showing them how to tie basic knots and explaining the importance of teamwork. Billy was nearby, helping Frank with a group of teenagers. He seemed more relaxed, his posture open and his interactions genuine. James watched as Billy spoke to the teens about the mistakes he'd made and the lessons he'd learned. It wasn't easy to admit wrongdoing, especially in front of others, but Billy was doing it, taking the first steps toward change. At one point, a young boy approached James, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Mister, were you really a soldier?" James smiled, nodding. "I was. I served overseas, but now I'm back home, just like everyone else here. We all have stories, and we all want to make this place better." The boy's face lit up. "That's cool. My dad says soldiers are heroes." James's smile softened. "Heroes are just people who do the right thing, even when it's hard. And sometimes, the right thing is just being kind to others." As the event came to a close, James felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't the grand gestures or the battles fought overseas that mattered most. It was the small moments, the connections made, and the willingness to stand up for what was right in everyday life. Billy approached James as the last of the kids left, his hands still dusty from helping clean up. "Thanks for not giving up on me, James. I know I've got a long way to go, but today felt good." James nodded, clapping Billy on the shoulder. "One step at a time, Billy. That's all any of us can do." Billy smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "Yeah, one step at a time." As James watched Billy walk away, he knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges. Prejudice and ignorance didn't disappear overnight. But moments like this, where understanding replaced hostility and hope replaced fear, were what made the fight worthwhile. James looked around the now quiet community center, the echoes of laughter and conversation still lingering in the air. He had come seeking peace, and though it hadn't come easily, he had found something even better, a sense of purpose. He knew that his journey wasn't over, but as long as he could inspire even one person to change, it was a journey worth taking. And as the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, James felt a renewed sense of hope, not just for himself, but for everyone willing to take that first step toward understanding and change. Weeks later, James received a letter from Billy. In it, Billy detailed how he had started volunteering with a local veterans organization, working to bridge divides and foster understanding among people from different walks of life. Billy's words were heartfelt, and they reaffirmed James's belief in the power of leading by example. The letter ended with a simple yet profound message. "Thank you for showing me what true strength looks like. You've inspired me to be better." James folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, a small smile playing on his lips. The battles he faced were far from over, but moments like these reminded him that change was possible, one person at a time. That evening, James sat on his porch, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and gold. The cicada's song filled the air, and for the first time in weeks, James felt a deep sense of peace. He knew that his actions, both on and off the battlefield, mattered. And in the quiet of that moment, he resolved to continue fighting for a world where respect and understanding prevailed. The next day, James decided to visit the local community center where Billy had started volunteering. He wanted to see firsthand the changes Billy spoke of. When he arrived, he was greeted by the sight of veterans and community members working together, planting a garden, organizing supplies, and sharing stories. Billy spotted James and waved him over, a genuine smile on his face. "Glad you could make it, James," Billy said, extending his hand. James shook his hand firmly. "I wanted to see the good work you've been doing. Looks like you're making a real difference." Billy nodded, his eyes reflecting a mix of pride and humility. "It's not just me. It's everyone here. We're all trying to make things better, one step at a time." James spent the afternoon at the center, lending a hand wherever he could. He helped plant flowers in the garden, shared stories with fellow veterans, and even joined in a group discussion about ways to promote inclusion and understanding within the community. The experience was humbling and uplifting, a reminder of the power of collective action. As the sun dipped below the horizon, James found himself sitting next to Billy on a bench overlooking the newly planted garden. The vibrant colors of the flowers stood in stark contrast to the struggles they represented, a symbol of hope and resilience. You know, Billy said, breaking the comfortable silence, I used to think that people couldn't change, that once you were set in your ways, that was it. But seeing everyone here, seeing you, it's changed my perspective. Change is possible, isn't it? James nodded, his gaze fixed on the garden. It is, but it takes courage. The kind of courage that comes from admitting when you're wrong and being willing to do better. And you're doing that, Billy. That's real bravery. Billy smiled, his eyes misting slightly. Thanks, James. That means a lot coming from you. They sat in silence for a while longer, watching as the community members began to wrap up their work for the day. Laughter and conversation filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension that had filled the bar just weeks before. It was a testament to the power of change, how a single act of kindness, a single decision to stand up for what's right, could create ripples that spread far beyond what anyone could predict. As the last of the volunteers headed out, an older veteran named Samuel approached James and Billy. His face was lined with age, and his eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen both the best and worst of humanity. He extended a hand to James, his voice filled with sincerity. I've heard about what you did at that bar, standing up to those guys. Takes a lot of guts. We need more people like you. James shook Samuel's hand, humbled by the praise. Just did what I thought was right, sir. Samuel nodded. That's what makes the difference, son. Doing what's right, even when it's hard. He turned to Billy, a gentle smile on his face. And you, young man, it takes a lot to admit when you're wrong and try to make it right. I respect that. Billy's face flushed slightly, but he smiled, clearly moved by Samuel's words. Thank you, sir. I'm trying. Samuel patted Billy on the shoulder. That's all any of us can do. Keep trying. After Samuel left, James and Billy sat quietly once more, the evening air cooling as the sky darkened. The garden before them seemed to glow in the fading light, a testament to the effort and care put into it. James felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the seeds they had planted, both in the garden and in the community, were beginning to take root. James, Billy said after a while, his voice thoughtful, I want to do more. Not just here, but beyond. I've been thinking about organizing a workshop, something for kids and teenagers, to teach them about respect, about understanding people who are different from them. I think if we can reach them when they're young, maybe we can prevent some of the hatred we've seen. James looked at Billy, admiration in his eyes. That's a great idea, Billy. Education is where it starts. If we can help even a few kids see things differently, it could make a world of difference. Billy nodded, determination in his expression. Will you help me? I could use someone like you, someone who knows what it means to lead by example. James smiled, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. Of course. I'm with you, Billy. Let's do it together. The two men sat there, outlining their plans as the stars began to dot the sky. They spoke of workshops, of reaching out to schools, of partnering with local organizations. Their vision was clear, to create a future where understanding and empathy were the norm, where kids grew up seeing diversity as a strength rather than a threat. As the night deepened, James felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long, but he was ready. With people like Billy by his side, he knew they could make a difference. Before they left the community center, James and Billy walked through the garden one last time. The flowers, delicate yet resilient, swayed gently in the breeze. They were a symbol of everything they were working toward. Beauty born from effort, hope rising from the soil of hardship. Billy turned to James, his voice steady. We're going to change things, aren't we? James nodded, his heart full. Yes, Billy. One step at a time, we're going to change things. And as they parted ways that night, James knew that this was just the beginning. The fight for a better world was far from over, but with every step they took, with every person they reached, they were moving closer to the kind of future they both believed in. A future built on respect, understanding, and hope.